Hey YouTube, Matt here. Welcome back to my channel. As promised, I wanted to follow up on yesterday's video by discussing some tips on how the average individual can go about discovering their, what I sincerely believe to be innate talents. I think each of us has talent within us. Those talents are not always so externally recognizable, but I feel that everybody can be exceptionally proficient and skilled at a particular task that really aligns itself with their unique character. I mean, everybody is completely unique in a sense, and everybody has particular interests. And again, the skills that people can master vary across each of us. And people will naturally lean towards skills, or I mean, of course, in this case, activities that they prefer to do. And what I'm really trying to get at here is helping any of you listening to this, discover not only your, again, innate abilities and strengths, but ways in which you can use those strengths to branch out into a career path that could actually help you procure a more successful existence, if that's something you're after. Now, it's obvious that, I mean, a lot of people are content doing what they're doing, just quietly grinding their time away. I mean, whatever you're going to do is going to be a grind, no matter what it is. You're going to grind, you're going to train, you're going to practice, you're going to try and get better at what you do. I mean, you're going to get better at what you do anyways if you're going to spend at least 4 to 8 hours a day doing it, as most, work days entail. 4 hours perhaps for part-time, but at least 8 hours, if not 9 or 10. I've even heard upwards of 16 hours. Some people are engaged in their work for 12 to 16 hours a day. And I think this is especially common in the private sector, where companies, they kind of expect you to stick around until projects are finished. Or there's a time crunch and you just want to get the work finished. I mean, I think some companies incentivize people with bonus pay. But again, that brings up a good point. A lot of people do the jobs they do simply because of the pay. And I mean, a lot of people are satisfied with that. They don't really care much beyond the pay that they acquire from the tasks they perform, because they'd rather just live a very simple life. They derive meaning through material acquisition of objects. I mean, and that's not a bad thing. Money is a tool. It's a tool used for transactions. So when you get the money, you can use it to provide for yourself. You can acquire things through money. And I mean, of course, you can invest money. You can build a career strictly around investing money itself. But the majority of people don't do that, obviously. So when it comes to occupying yourself, I mean, statistically, I've heard that 90% of people are discontent with the work they're performing. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, it's very easy to think of jobs that are just not very glamorous. But at the same time, there are people who perform those jobs who actually are passionate about that kind of activity. So we have to be very careful in not criticizing the nature of work and particular occupations, because what one person finds distasteful, another person can find absolute joy in. So, I mean, I won't even, well, to give an example, perhaps, maybe somebody absolutely enjoys custodial work. It's just something that drives them. It wakes them up in the morning. They're excited to do that task, and it's a very important job. And at the same time, a lot of people might scoff at that kind of work because it just doesn't engage them in the way that they hoped or hope or believe a fulfilling job actually would. And again, this key word I bring up here, fulfillment. What is it that fulfills you? Now, in trying to discover your talent, let's talk about so activities that can fulfill you are activities. One great indicator of that is not looking at the clock when you're engaged in that activity and realizing time is just slipping away from you. It's melting away. You feel it as if there isn't enough time in a lifetime for you to really sink your teeth into that activity. And I have to be very specific here. I am not talking about something like playing video games or what else absorbs time that isn't fruitful. I mean, a lot of people argue. I have to use video games as an example because they're so popular. Billions and billions, maybe even trillions of hours at this point have been poured into video games collectively by the human population. the human species, and it is kind of alarming. But I mean, I think a lot of the time people are playing video games to simply numb the pain of the reality they exist within. And I'm not bashing games. I think games are an art form unto themselves. But I've always made this kind of ironic argument that games should be created but never really played, because all that game time is really taking away from the user, the gamer. All that time could be spent developing transferable skills that you can actually transfer to other types of work. And again, you've got to, work is something you do to find fulfillment, but also procure a livelihood. You've got to make money somehow to exist within the framework and structure of the social setting we find ourselves in. Money is important, and finding a way to make money without it being a massive chore, a heinous grind, I think is something really important, because it's going to help people simply find joy in being alive, and not finding joy to be such a drudgerous daily task, a chore. Life itself should not be a chore. I mean, work is going to feel like work, but it shouldn't feel like a shitty grind. It definitely should not. And I mean, if you're in that position, I weep for you. I've been there myself. But you grow from it. You're supposed to grow from it. You're supposed to realize this is not something that I enjoy. It's causing me stress or duress, and a lot of that might be in silence. But at the same time, another way to find out actually if your job is something you really dislike is looking at the habits you get up to performing when you're off work. Are you sitting in front of the TV? Are you burnt out? Are you exhausted? I mean, I can argue when you're performing particular activities, someone engaged in a hobby, for instance, it might be painting models or even playing a sport, hitting some golf balls on the driving range, or even going hiking. I mean, these tasks, these activities can be so fulfilling, even though they require physical exertion, that you don't even feel tired performing them. You can't wait to wake up and do them again. I mean, and a lot of people reserve their hobbies for the weekend when they have some actual time to get to them, because during the week, the weekday, the work week, they're just too tired to get up to doing them. And it's tragic, but it's a reality that exists, but it's not a reality that needs to exist. And I am so strongly for a proactive approach to basically the human species moving forwards in a way where everybody can find fulfillment in what they do, at least for a modicum of time during the day, that is, again, fruitful and productive. Something that brings you joy. There's a very fine distinction between joy and happiness. Happiness is something that's quick. It's that dopamine spurt in the brain that makes you smile. You feel happy and good, but it's not sustainable, and it's definitely not fulfilling, because it doesn't last. A good example of that is kind of like a lot of people like to shop. You go shopping, you buy something, you're excited in the moment, you're happy because you bought it, you have it, it's now in your possession, but then you go home and a week later you forget you even bought it. That's a good example of the fleeting nature of happiness. But joy is different. Joy is something you experience in the moment. It almost transcends time. And this kind of leads me to my next point. It transcends time. You lose track of time, and it's extremely fulfilling, and you can engage in it for hours on end. It doesn't let up. And the longer you spend doing it, the more skilled you get at it, the more you take away from it. It doesn't take away from you. You pour yourself into it and you get something back. Usually things that bring us happiness, they're quick, they're fleeting, they're expensive, and they don't provide fulfillment. But activities that provide joy, that bring us joy, provide actual meaning. So then we start to veer into what creates an actual meaningful life. And just think about specific careers people have that you can quite easily tell that there is profound meaning in their lives. And it doesn't have to do with all of the external rewards that they're acquiring by performing those activities. Think of, athletes, celebrities, artists, musicians. The world celebrates their performance by showering them with, recognition, fame, wealth, gifts, but that's only the icing on the cake of their experience, because what they're doing, actually being engaged in those activities, is what brings meaning in their lives. Everything else is extra. It's all a bonus. But people that are not engaged in activity that truly brings them meaning or fulfillment, they look forward to the paycheck, because the paycheck is what they can use to buy things, to try and buy experiences that will only provide temporary happiness and not joy. So now that came off kind of black and white. You can use that money to engage in hobbies that might bring you a taste of that fulfillment. But again, if it's costly, it's taking away from you. You want to be able to generate money through what you're doing, so you can feel at peace. You feel like you're in your zone. You feel like you're carrying out what you were, essentially made to do. I think there is something for everybody. I truly think that everybody has strengths and abilities that are for them to use to pursue the right career, the right direction, move them in the right direction towards a truly meaningful existence. And as I'd mentioned in yesterday's video, I think a lot of the issues we deal with in the world, a lot of the strife and unrest and confusion and fear comes from people just not knowing who they are. It's a very tragic thing. It's a very sad thing. It's always been something that has been on my mind. It's been a topic of significance and importance for me. I remember back in the day when I was much younger, I was really into the self-help type books, especially trying to understand personality types. I remember I think I still have in my collection a Myers-Briggs personality test book. It was so fascinating to read that. And it's funny because every year I've taken, I don't mean to digress here, but every year I've taken that same test. And I mean, it's just one test of many you can take. And it's not completely comprehensive or all encompassing, but it is a decent marker to let you know kind of where you lie with your skills and your interests. And every year I take the test and I think it's a little bit different. My choices, like I've grown a little bit, I've changed, but I always end up getting the same results for my personality type. And then I think about the activities I pursue that lend themselves to that type. And I think, it's kind of like I've always innately known what I should be doing, what suits me best. And I may not be completely correct. There might be other ways that I can take my abilities now and transfer them elsewhere where they can be even more productive for me, fruitful and beneficial for society at large. But and again, okay, so back on topic here. This topic it gets me really excited because I think it's something that so many people can benefit from, and it's helped me spending time thinking about it to find fulfillment in my own life, and I know it can for other people out there too. So I would strongly recommend starting with a personality test, just to find out through the scientific method how well, as far as that goes, because it's all psychologically based, how like what your personality type is, where your skills lie on that particular end of that spectrum. And you will find they'll often provide a list of careers that might be attuned to who you are as that particular personality type. It's never definitive, it's never completely accurate, but I think it's a great way to try and figure out a little bit more about who you are, without doing a lot of the mental homework that is actually required to find out who you are. And that's where the real work component comes into play. You have to really spend time meditating with yourself, contemplating, thinking about just your life, reflecting, and going deep inside and thinking about the things you like, wondering who you are, why you do the things you do, what you want to do, what you don't want to do. Sitting down with yourself and figuring out these questions, contemplating these questions, finding out the answers is going to really help you achieve a sense of discovery within yourself. Now, another way to figure out what you might be very proficient at, so much so that you can procure a livelihood, is, like I mentioned, not only time slipping away, but when you're performing a task, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be something so glamorous. Again, I have to emphasize that you find yourself slipping into almost a state of trance. It's almost like a hypnotic state of mind. The colloquial expression is being in the zone. When you're in the zone, your mind kind of opens itself up to like sheer raw creativity. And I find when I'm engaged in art, my art practice, visual art creation, whether I'm doing an imagination drawing for myself or a study or client commission work, I find after at least a good 30 minutes to an hour, I get into the zone and my mind just unlocks itself and all this kind of creative energy pours out. And I'm able to come up with creative solutions that I wouldn't necessarily be able to come up with outside of being engaged in the activity. So that's another really keen indicator that can help you figure out if you're in the right place in your mind while you're doing that activity. You see, you don't want to do something that, let's say you really hate doing doing a chore, like you hate doing like washing dishes. Now, let's say you had to wash so many piles of dishes that it took you 8 hours to do it. I actually had a job when I was much younger before I went back to school where I was in a kitchen and I was washing dishes. There were moments where I was in a state of peace, but for the most part, I would always be looking around thinking like, well, what the hell am I doing? What is this? This is not where I should be. It's definitely, it paid actually quite well at the time and I was making good money, but I mean, that can be a trap unto itself too. You might be attached to a job you hate simply because it pays a lot. And don't cheat yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Fulfillment is really going to come from, again, finding out who you are. I mean, that alone is just going to provide so much more meaning in your life, and you're going to be a happier person. You're going to be far less prone to depression, in my opinion, or just the negative states of feeling, because you're going to know what you can turn to keep yourself in a very positive, I don't even, positive might not even be the right word, but natural state of being. Natural. You want to be as natural, and this might, I like to use this analogy. Think about objects in nature like trees. A tree is not trying to be a rock. A tree is a tree and it grows into its own. A rock is a rock. Water is water. Water is not trying to be a rock. These aspects of reality we encounter, these objects, these inanimate objects, are just as they are. And human beings are so much more complex, of course. But I believe that we kind of have I think we have like a seed within us that needs to flourish with the right information. To help that seed grow, we need to provide ourselves with the right information so we can learn enough about how to make that seed flourish, how to develop a garden within our consciousness that is just ripe with fruit that can help us live better. And that fruit isn't necessarily just money. It's, enhancing our relationships with people around the world and with the world itself. Okay, friends, I think I'm going to stop here. I could definitely go on this topic, but I don't want to keep you guys too long. I will certainly return to this topic with more thoughts regarding self-discovery and trying to discover what your talents are. Think about that. Think really carefully. What is it you like to do that doesn't take away from you, but provides you with a deep sense of purpose and meaning? It might even be just painting. I mean, I don't mean to say just, but I have my best friend, actually. He's really keen on painting miniature figures. And it takes a tremendous amount of skill and patience and I'd say dedication to accomplishing that hobby. And he's done some tremendous work. And I think he could actually, let's say he took that all the way. He could probably teach people how to do that effectively because it's something that requires a great degree of skill. And another thing too, just my last point, doing something that really tests your patience, but in a way that you're not even thinking about, it's such a tremendous way to build character. It's such a tremendous way to find a way in which you can discipline yourself to doing an activity. This happens through practicing that activity. Practice is critical for skill development. So whether you're playing an instrument or you're learning a language or you're creating visual art, practice is key to developing that ability. So think of something that you like practicing that, again, it isn't taking away from you. And I think you might be closer to finding out exactly what you should be doing and perhaps even who you are. All right, friends, you guys have a great one. If you enjoyed this content, if you liked the topic I discussed today, consider subscribing and absolutely leave your comments. I always enjoy reading everyone's comments. And if you have any criticisms, I welcome anything you want to throw at me. I'm ready. I'm ready to take it on and just hear what you guys have to say. That feedback is so critical and important. It's important to me. You guys have a great one. I'll catch you in another video. Take care.